So in this tutorial, we're going to be going over loops. Now, before we explain loops, I want to emphasize that computers are very good at doing repetitive tasks quickly. Now, one of the primary mechanisms we can use to leverage this ability are to use any of the available loop constructs in JavaScript. A loop is basically a block of code that repeats over and over again until some criteria is met. So a simple analogy might be this. Imagine you have a pile of bricks and you need to pick each one up individually and place it in a different pile until all of the bricks are stacked. The process of walking over, picking up a brick, placing it in a pile, and then repeating this process over and over again is something you might consider a loop. Once all the bricks are stacked, this would be considered terminating the loop because you've completed your task. In JavaScript, there are three primary types of loops. They are while, do while, and for. So now we're going to get started by going over while loops. A while loop looks like this. This is an empty while loop, and the while loop has three parts. First, you declare the while loop with the word while. You then have two parentheses where we place a condition. If the code in the parentheses evaluates to true, then the code that's in the block gets executed. So let's give a concrete example. So here we have a while loop that uses a variable called num that has a 0 assigned to it. This while loop is saying that if the variable num is less than 20, to execute the code in the block. The code in the block then increments the num variable by 1. This pattern then repeats until the variable num is equal to 20. At that point, the loop stops executing. We can see this using the Chrome developer tools. You might be wondering why the variable num, if its last value is supposed to be assigned to 20 before the while loop terminates, how come in the Chrome developer tools it lists the last value as 19? Well, the answer to that is that the last loop assigns 20 to our variable num, and it doesn't loop again, hence you don't get the variable readout. In the Chrome developer tools, you can type in a variable and you can get the assignment of that variable. And if you notice, its last assignment is in fact 20. The next type of loop is the do while loop. The do while loop looks like this. Now, this probably looks a bit different than any of the code you've seen up to this point. The do while loop consists of a do statement. This is then followed by a code block. Then after the block we have a while statement with a pair of parentheses that are used to contain a conditional statement. So let's take a look at our example. We basically have a variable titled num set to 0, then we increment this variable by 1. We then see if our num variable is still less than 20, and if it is, the loop repeats. So one thing to mention, as you can see, the code block is written first prior to the conditional statement. So to briefly demonstrate what I'm talking about, I'm going to take our num variable and I'm going to assign it to 20. Then I'm going to launch our code inside of the Chrome browser and open up the developer tools. And if you look, the output is 21. Now if you look at the code, the reason behind this is that the code within the do block executes first before the conditional statement. This demonstrates that the code is always going to be run at least once before it gets to the conditional statement. The last type of loop we're going to discuss is the for loop. The for loop is the more complicated yet more widely used type of loop of the three. Now here's an example of what a functioning for loop looks like. This might look a little bit daunting, so let's explain each part in detail. The for loop begins with the for statement. Next we have a pair of parentheses which contains three semicolon separated pieces of code. The first piece of code is called the initialization statement. This is a piece of code that is executed before the actual loop begins. In our case, the initializer is the variable I with the value 0 assigned to it. The initialization variable acts as a counter to snapshot how many times our loop is run. And just to let you know, the letter I doesn't hold any special significance, but it is a common convention to use I as the initialization variable among JavaScript programmers. After the initialization code, we have a conditional statement. In our example, we state that if I is less than 20, then to do something. Well, the thing we do in this condition is listed in the next piece of code. Here we're incrementing the I variable once each pass of the loop. In other words, each time this loop is run, 1 gets added to the I variable, and then when I equals 20, the loop then terminates. We can see this in action by using console.log and viewing the results in the Chrome Developer Tools. One thing to point out is that each semicolon separated code section within the for loop's parentheses can have more than one expression. The way that you can implement this is by separating them with a comma. This has been a few examples of how to work with loops. Until next time, bye-bye.